The Houston Texans decided to shake things up at the left tackle position. But the better question is, who's going to protect CJ's blind side?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation! Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brian Big Sarge Bearfield, your Text Credential Media member and insider, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. On today's show, the Texas offensive woes won't solve themselves. Free agency brings back familiar faces. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. But the biggest news coming out of Houston, Texas on Monday was the Texans trading five-time Pro Bowl left tackle Laremy Tunsil and a fourth-round pick in the 2025 NFL draft to the Washington Commanders for a third and seventh-round pick in this year's draft and a second and a fourth in 2026. That's right, Battle Red Nation. You heard me right. Five-time Pro Bowl left tackle Laremy Tunsil has been traded to the Washington Commanders. And I don't know where you were when you got the news, but I had to pull over when I got the news. When I was told, hey, Laremy Tunsil is being traded, I had to pull over and stop and say, wait a minute, what's going on? What happened? You're trading your Pro Bowl left tackle? You're trading the best pass blocker that you have on your team? You're trading the guy who has been protecting your franchise quarterback for the last 2 years. You're trading the guy who only gave up 2.5 sacks in 2024. You're trading the guy who in 2023 was rated the best pass blocker in the league by Pro Football Focus. You're trading the guy who at the end of 2024 had an 88.6 pass blocker rating, which made it fourth in the league according to Pro Football Focus. That's who you're trading. You're trading CJ security blanket. Okay, so if you're gonna do that, I get it. I understand. I got it. Right? I understand. I got it. Because even with all of that, what the Houston Texans had to take a step back and look at is Tunsil was due $21.3 million next season, and he was looking for a contract extension before the end of his contract in 2026. So Laremy Tunsil was looking for the bag. The problem is you can't give him the bag, especially when you got to give Derek Stingley Jr. a bag, when you got to get Will Anderson Jr. a bag, and with the deal that the Buffalo Bills made with Josh Allen on Monday, CJ Stroud is going to get a bag. And he's going to get a big bag, a real big bag. Nico Collins performs the way that he performed in 2024, barring injuries, being able to play a full healthy season. He'll be an all-pro. You're going to have to give him a bag. And then after that, you're going to have to look at these other players that have contributed to the Houston Texans and their success. What the Houston Texans want to do is they want to get to an AFC Championship game. Not only do they want to get to an AFC Championship game, they also want to get to a Super Bowl. And you can't do that if you're cash strapped. By cutting Shaq Mason, making him a post-June 1 cut, you're saving money. By trading Laremy Tunsil, you're saving money. But in the midst of saving that money, you're also losing out on one of the best left tackles in the game. And that's where it gets a little muddy. Because now you got to ask yourself, hey, who's going to protect CJ? Who's going to protect his blind side? Now, there was a lot of chatter on social media about moving on from Laremy Tunsil, and I can understand it. I can understand it. There's a lot of people who don't think that Laremy Tunsil takes accountability for his play when he plays bad. There's a lot of people who don't think that Laremy Tunsil takes accountability for the 19 penalties that he had. There are a lot of individuals who believe that Laremy Tunsil, with that C on his chest for team captain and with the amount of money that he was making, should have been a more vocal leader for the offensive line should have been one of those guys to get the offensive line in shape, especially when the Houston Texans had one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL in 2024. They gave up 54 sacks. CJ was sacked 52 times in the regular season. But if you add the postseason to it, they gave up 65 sacks. I think that they had the 5th highest pressure rate as well. We all watched from week 2 on how they weren't able to deal with delayed blitz and stunts. And there's a lot of people that believe that as a captain, as a person making that amount of money, Laremy Tunsil should have been the one that went to the rest of the offensive line and said, get it together. Because he's the one who leads by example. But he isn't a big rah-rah guy. He's a big, hey, everybody got to do their job. And the one thing that I was privileged to that a lot of people weren't, which is the reason why I have a different view on Laremy Tunsil, is because I got an opportunity to speak to Laremy Tunsil on numerous occasions during the open locker room sessions. And the one thing that I know about Laremy Tunsil is he does take accountability. Now, he could have done himself some favors by speaking to the media more, speaking to the fans more. But that's something that he didn't do. And so he has to live with whatever criticism comes with what the fans think. But Laremy Tunsil has a very, very good football mind. Laremy Tunsil takes accountability. When you talk to his teammates, as far as in his position, when you talk to his teammates in the offensive line room, they'll tell you, "Hey, man, he's open to criticism, and he does criticize. He does lead." But that's something that you all never seen if you didn't have the privilege to be inside of the Texans locker room. And not only did you have to be inside the Texans locker room, you actually had to talk to Laremy Tunsil. No, he wasn't the guy that was going to go on camera, but he definitely would talk to you on and off the record. That's something that I was able to do, and some of my colleagues were able to do as well. But he didn't do himself any favors by not talking to the media. I think that he would have done himself a bigger service by going on camera at least, a couple of more times while he was here. I don't remember. I think it was maybe 1, maybe 2 times we talked to Laremy in 2024 on the record as far as in front of cameras, as far as the media scrum is concerned. And the problem then was it sounded like he was blaming the refs for the pre-snap penalties that he had. And so he didn't do himself any favors by not talking to the media, not talking to the fans. And now, and of course, with the way that he is as far as fashion is concerned, people are thinking that he's a prima donna, that they think he's a diva, and that's far, far, far from the truth. But I can understand why the Houston Texans wanted to move on from Laremy Tunsil because of the salary. That salary was huge, especially when you have other players, younger players, that you have to pay. Another thing, another thing when it comes to Laremy Tunsil, and people want him to be a more vocal leader. One thing that D'Amico Ryans has said throughout this offseason with the hiring of offensive coordinator Nick Caley, with the promoting of Cole Popovich from assistant offensive line coach to offensive line coach. One thing that D'Amico Ryans has said consistently every time he has been on camera, I need one voice in that room. One voice in that room, which tells you that there was a lot of voices in that room. There was a lot of voices in that room. A lot of voices that sometimes got along, a lot of voices that sometimes did not get along. And so even inside of that offensive line room, when you have former offensive line Chris Strausser saying something, when you have Cole Popovich saying something, and then you have Laremy trying to say something, and then you may have Shaq Mason trying to say something. The one thing that D'Amico Ryans made made clear this offseason was I need one voice in that room. One voice. One. And I think what Cole Popovich is going to do is he's going to be that one voice in that room. There's a lot of talk about culture and the changing of culture, and I get it. Like I said, if you don't know Laremy Tunsil, it definitely looks like that. It definitely looks like the Houston Texans need a culture change. They need a culture shift. And so moving on from Laremy Tunsil and saving that money and getting younger on that offensive line is something that I think that the Houston Texans definitely needed to do. Now, I asked the question. I asked the question. Who's going to protect CJ's blind side? And I'll tell you who I think it should be coming up after the break. This show is sponsored by Betterhelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. But with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. As a veteran who suffers from mental health issues, who deals with mental health issues on a consistent basis, I definitely appreciate having a therapist to be able to listen to me and especially when I'm dealing with a lot of issues going on in my personal life, in my professional life, and sometimes that can be very very overwhelming. Sometimes that can also take you by surprise, especially when you're dealing with things that are constantly coming at you all at once. And so I'm happy to be able to have a therapist. And I think that if you're going through the same type of things, that's something that you may want to seek and that you may need as well. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/locked on today to get 10% off of your first month. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/locked on. Welcome back, Battle Red Nation, to the Locked On Texas podcast. All right, before I went to the break, I told you all that I have an idea of what I think that the Houston Texans are going to do when it comes to replacing Laremy Tunsil. During training camp last year, Blake Fisher, rookie at the time, filled in for Laremy Tunsil as Laremy Tunsil was dealing with a minor injury that he was recovering from, a minor surgery that he was recovering from throughout training camp. So Laremy Tunsil didn't participate in training camp a lot last year. And so Blake Fisher was at the left tackle position. Now we know that Blake Fisher ended up being a right tackle at the end of the season because they moved Titus Howard from the right tackle position to the left guard position because they needed help there. But during training camp, Blake Fisher was at the left tackle position, and I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if you all know what the saying "baptized by fire" means, but every day that he lined up with that starting line unit, that starting offensive line unit at the left tackle position, he was going up against Danielle Hunter. He was going up against Will Anderson, Danico Autry sometimes, Derek Barnett sometimes, Dylan Horton sometimes. And every snap for him was a battle. And that's a lot to handle as a rookie. But as time went on, and if you know anything about Blake Fisher, you know that he's one of those guys that is very competitive. He doesn't want to lose. And so he started to get better as training camp went on. And he was still losing a lot of battles, but it was good on the job training for him. He also filled in a couple of times when Laremy Tunsil went out. Had to be out for a couple of snaps. He filled in at the left tackle position before ending the season at the right tackle position. So I look at it as Blake Fisher could definitely fill in and be a starter at that left tackle position, and that means that you move Titus Howard back to the right tackle position, and then you attack what you're going to do at the guard positions. If you're going to fill that through free agency, if you're going to fill that through the draft, however you're going to do that, if you're going to make Juice Scruggs, put Juice Scruggs back at the right guard position, if you're going to give Kenyon Green another opportunity under Cole Popovich and a new offensive coordinator and Nick Caley, if you're going to give Kenyon Green another opportunity to prove that he deserves to be a starter, then you put him back in that position. But in order to I feel like the Houston Texans, and we talked about it on this show a while back with the DIY, do it yourself. I think that Nick Caserio could do it yourself, especially. And when we're talking about the offensive line, I think that now that you've gotten rid of Laremy Tunsil, you can put Blake Fisher right there. And what that does is that gets you younger across that line. If you're going to have Juice Scruggs at the right guard position, Jared Patterson at the center position, Kenyon Green, or whoever you draft at the left guard position, and then you have Blake Fisher at the left tackle. Now what you've done is you've restarted that offensive line. You've gotten younger. You've gotten rid of Laremy Tunsil, who was older. You've gotten rid of Shaq Mason, who was older. And now the only person left on that line who would be considered the vet will be Titus Howard at that right tackle position. So, like I said, I feel like that's something that the Houston Texans can do. I don't think they have to rush out and try to find a left tackle as of right now. I think that they already may have that left tackle on their roster, and that's Blake Fisher. All right, so other things transpired on Monday outside of the big news of the Houston Texans trading Laremy Tunsil to the Washington Commanders. A couple of a couple of signings that the Houston Texans made during the legal tampering period are going to make once free agency actually starts. But these are the proposed things that are going to happen because it's only the legal tampering. They haven't signed anything just yet. They picked up Justin Watson, wide receiver from the Kansas City Chiefs. Jake Hansen, who was drafted by the Houston Texans, signed a 1 year, 1.7 will sign a 1 year, $1.7 million deal to remain with the team. They picked up an edge rusher from the Chicago Bears and Darrell Taylor, and then they welcomed back some familiar faces. Tremon Smith, cornerback, is going to sign a 2 year, $7.5 million deal to come back to the Houston Texans. Now, he's been with the Denver Broncos for the last 2 years, and he was with the Houston Texans before, but that gives that Houston Texans special teams a boost. That gives them a boost. And it also gives them some depth. Something that John and I have talked about on this show was who's going to back up Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley Jr.? That's a big concern that the Houston Texans are going to have to address, and maybe that's something that they will address now that they have these additional draft picks. But the Houston Texans get Tremon Smith back. They're going to re-sign Derek Barnett for a 1 year, $5 million deal. He's one of the guys that is a very, very, very important part of the Houston Texans defensive line. And I mean, think about it. He doesn't have a touchdown celebration yet. He told me that personally. He's like, I don't have a touchdown celebration. I told him you might want to work on one, especially since you are scoring touchdowns like you are. Derek Barnett scored 2 defensive touchdowns off of fumble recoveries last season, and he still doesn't have a touchdown dance, a touchdown celebration. But it was good to see that the Houston Texans brought him back to be part, to stay a part of that defensive line unit. Someone who is also a leader by example, who doesn't do a lot of talking. He just goes out there and play. They also will sign Braxton Berrios, wide receiver from the Miami Dolphins, another special teams guy. I think that he was an all-pro as a special teamer when he was with the New York Jets in 2021. He's also a serviceable backup as backup in the slot position. and especially with them with them trading for Christian Kirk and bringing him to the Houston Texans, getting Braxton Berrios, who I like the way Braxton Berrios plays. I like what he brings. He's that shifty type of, wide receiver, but he's also very, very good on returns as far as special teams is concerned. And I like that. I like that shiftiness about him. It looks like, if he gets the opportunity to back up Christian Kirk as far as the slot position is concerned, and if he gets some snaps, I think that Nick Caley will be able to use him, and I think that he will be more serviceable than just on special teams. I think that he could make some noise as far as the time that he has on the field once Nick Caley puts him in that offensive scheme. And Ben McDaniel's he is a good wide receivers coach. We're going to see what he's going to do with Braxton Berrios. And so the Houston Texans pick up wide receiver Justin Watson from the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to re-sign Jake Hansen. Their edge rusher Darrell Taylor from the Chicago Bears. They brought back Tremont Smith. They brought back Tremont Smith. They're going to sign Braxton Berrios. They re-signed Derek Barnett. But the biggest acquisition so far for the Houston Texans outside of the draft picks from the Washington Commanders is Sheldon Rankins. Sheldon Rankins will return to the Houston Texans on a 1-year, $7 million deal after spending a year with the Cincinnati Bengals. I think he only played 7 games with the Cincinnati Bengals because he got sick. He was dealing with illness, and he was dealing with multiple injuries, and so he only played 7 games for the for the Cincinnati Bengals. But the year prior to him going to the Cincinnati Bengals, he was a very key part of the Texans' success in the rookie year, in CJ Stroud's rookie year, and Will Anderson Jr.'s rookie year as DeMeco Ryans' first time head coach. In that 2023 season, Sheldon Rankins was a key part in helping that defensive unit get to where they needed to be. Look, we understand and we know that a lot of people didn't expect the Houston Texans to have the success that they had by getting to the divisional round of the playoffs before losing to the Baltimore Ravens. But one of the people that helped them get there, one of the veterans in that locker room and on the field who helped them was Sheldon Rankins. And in the grand scheme of things, you'll go back and you'll look at Sheldon Rankins. Stats, and they won't stick out to you. His stats are not going to jump out at you. His stats are not going to stick out to you right off the bat. But I will say this, right? I will say this. Give me a second. I think I had in 2023, Sheldon Rankins had 6 sacks, 37 combined tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 10 quarterback hits, 1 forced fumble, touchdown. And that was in 2023. And so you hear those stats, and some of those stats are not going to jump out to you. So you're saying, why would they bring back Sheldon Rankins? Well, they would bring back Sheldon Rankins because he is a very good locker room guy. He still can produce on the field when healthy. But the biggest reason you bring him back is because if you look at the way that Will Anderson Jr. played his rookie season, a lot of that was due to Sheldon Rankins teaching him how to be a pro. Sheldon Rankins teaching Will Anderson Jr. how to play in the NFL, how to be a pro. Of course, Will is naturally gifted and talented on the athletic side. He's way more athletic than Sheldon Rankins, especially at this point of Sheldon Rankins' career. But just him being in that close proximity of Will and being able to talk to him consistently, Will having questions as a rookie, and Sheldon Rankins being able to answer it for him. Sheldon Rankins inside of the defensive line room talking to Will Anderson Jr. That's what you want. You want to bring back a guy like Sheldon Rankins who can still perform on the field, but is also one of those good locker room guys, who's also one of those good vets. And you add him, and now he blends in, with Danielle Hunter. He blends in with Derek Barnett. He blends in with Danico Autry. He blends in with Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson Jr., Tim Settle Jr. And especially with him coming back, I don't think that the Houston Texans are going to bring back Foley Fatukasi or Mario Edwards. And Foley, unfortunately, Foley didn't have a lot of opportunity to play and do the things that he wanted to do while he was here in that 1 year because of him sustaining injuries that kept him out for a long period of time. But Sheldon Rankins is somebody that you want to have in your locker room around your players, not only on the defense side of the ball, but the offensive side of the ball as well. One of those guys who, if you talk ball with him, he definitely knows ball, and he's definitely one of those guys who wants to lead by example. He wants to be that veteran that that defensive line unit comes to, that those linebackers come to, that those defensive backs come to. So it wasn't a big splash that the Houston Texans made on Monday as far as free agency is concerned and as far as re-signing some of the players back. It wasn't a big splash, but if the biggest splash was bringing back Sheldon Rankins. Now, the Houston Texans got a lot of issues on the offensive side of the ball. Something that we have discussed a lot here on the Locked On Texans podcast. But after the break, we're going to talk about how they can fix some of those offensive woes. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Locked On Texans podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. All right, so the Texans' offensive woes won't solve themselves, right? The Texans have a lot of offensive woes. They definitely need offensive line help. They definitely need interior offensive line help. They definitely need wide receiver help. They need a backup running back. They have the tight ends, but do they have the tight ends? And so when you look at the Houston Texans and you look at that offensive side of the ball and you look at them trading away their Pro Bowl left tackle, now you're saying to yourself, well, how will they get better? And the problem is, first of all, this free agent market, this free agent market that in the NFL right now, it's not good. I'm sorry, y'all. I know that you all want me to say something positive, but it's not good. It's not. We've talked about this before. I'll say it once again. When you look at the free agents, right? When you look at the free agents as far as the wide receiver position is concerned, who's left outside of bringing back Stephon Diggs? There's nobody in that wide receiver in that wide receiver group that you're looking at that can be a true number two to Nico Collins. There's nobody that's left that can be a true number two outside of Stephon Diggs, and you don't know what's going to happen with him coming off that injury, him missing that amount of time, him as being the older wide receiver. What can he bring? He's still a very good wide receiver, but you don't know how his body is going to react, what his mindset is going to be coming off this injury. Because once wide receivers start getting a little bit older, they start thinking about things like that just a tad bit more. And so Stephon Diggs is about the only good wide receiver left. There is no Devontae Adams. He's gone to the Los Angeles Rams. There is no DK Metcalf. He went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so when you're looking at what's left, I don't think that there's any true number twos left. Now, this is where I feel like the Houston Texans can fix those offensive woes, because they're not going to fix themselves as far as free agency is concerned. May be able to fix it in the draft, but you're going to have to trade up to get a really good wide receiver. You're going to have to trade up to get a Matthew Golden. And that's somebody that we've talked about a lot on this show, wide receiver of the University of Texas. but he is probably by far one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in this draft. I mean, not including Travis Hunter, but we can't use Travis Hunter because his primary position is going to be cornerback, even though the team that drafted him is going to let him play some wide receiver. With that being said, you look at Matthew Golden. He hasn't even had his pro day yet at the University of Texas. So his stock is going to keep rising. And so with some of those draft picks that the Houston Texans got by trading Laremy Tunsil, they may be able to package something up and get another a number 2 wide receiver from another team. They may be able to take some of that draft capital and trade with another team and fix that position. There's some teams out there who have very good wide receivers. They have very good wide receivers who are open to listen to some trade offers and some trade packages. That's something we'll discuss later on this week. There are some teams who will listen to some trade packages who have other needs that they need to fill, and they're going to try to fill that in the draft, especially drafting players that they can keep on a rookie salary for a while as they develop. Something that the Houston Texans could also do by trying to fix their offensive woes. But they may be able to use some of that draft capital that they have acquired and with the cap space that they're going to have now, and they may be able to package that and put together a deal to trade for a number 2 wide receiver and then use the remaining draft capital to get better at the interior offensive line position to find a backup running back. But those are the type of things that Nick Caserio is going to have to think about. And those are the type of things that Nick Caserio is going to definitely have to push as they head into the NFL draft. As this free agency, the free agency has opened, and you're going to have to get on the phone, Nick. You're going to have to talk to some of those teams and say, "Hey, look, what do you want for Garrett Wilson? What do you want for Chris Olave?" And I'm only using those because, of course, we know that the T. Higgins right now is definitely out of the question because the Cincinnati Bengals aren't willing to give him up. They franchise tagged him again. They're not willing to give him up, are they? Cincinnati Bengals have a lot. They have a lot of issues that they need fixed. They got a lot of money tied up with Joe Burrow. They have a lot of money tied up in Trey Hendrickson. They definitely got to pay a Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins is going to be looking for a big bag next season. But the Houston Texans have the draft capital right now. The Houston Texans are freeing up a lot of the cap space to get things done right now. And if the Cincinnati Bengals pick up the phone, I'm pretty sure that Nick Caserio would not let them hang up without getting a deal done. And that would fix a lot of the Texans' offensive woes. Nico Collins, T. Higgins, in a Nick Caley offensive system, who we have not seen him call one play just yet. But if we can, look into the future of what we think that it could be, especially learning from Sean McVay in that Los Angeles Rams offense, and him maybe saying, "Hey, look, I can do the same thing. I have the quarterback to do it. I already have one wide receiver, just like they have Matthew Stafford and they have Puka Nacua. We got C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins, and then the Rams went out and what did they do? They added Devontae Adams. So if the Houston Texans go out and they can add, if they can add a player like T. Higgins, that'd be something, right? That'd be something that the Houston Texans fans would definitely get on board for. That's definitely something that would make CJ very, very happy, and it would also fix a lot of the offensive woes. Thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Texans podcast. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Texans podcast, available wherever you get your podcast from, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you follow the Locked On Texans Twitter page at Locked On Texans, and make sure you follow me at Big Star Sports with the Z at the end on the app formerly known as Twitter. Thank you, Battle Red Nation. Until next time, peace.